Hello viewers, well I'm here in Holland and it's a great pleasure to be speaking to Janiene Adamse, who is an ex-Jehovah's Witness, originally from the United Kingdom but now living here in Holland with her husband. Nice to be with you here, Janiene.
Lovely having you.
In your lovely apartment. And could you just give us a little bit of background with how you came to be involved with Jehovah's Witnesses?
Yeah. Well, my grandparents on my father's side, they were Jehovah's Witnesses for many, many years. And then when I was 8, my sister went over there and she was talking to my grandmother and she was like, this is a good idea, we should be involved and we'll have eternal life. And so she came back and then my parents decided it would be a good thing for us to join again. So that's how we got involved. Yeah.
Now, something that I've tried to cover as much as I can, but I'm a little bit limited because of the nature of the problem is domestic violence. Because with child abuse you have situations where perhaps it might take years later, but the victims find the strength to come forward and find it easier to perhaps pursue legal action. But because of the nature of domestic violence and the fact that it happens within the family, quite often it gets buried. Now, you are a victim of domestic violence as a Jehovah's Witness when you were a Jehovah's Witness. Could you describe your experience and how you came to get out of that situation?
Okay. Well, when I was 17 and a half, we had like what they call a dysfunctional family anyway. And when I was 17 and a half, I married a Jehovah's Witness, thinking that I was going to do it all right.
So you married very young?
Yes.
And was he quite young as well?
He was 20,
right.
Yeah, he was just a little bit older than I was. But marrying in the faith, we thought we were doing it all right and whatever. And I was happy for 1 week of the marriage, and then it started. And he was a very violent, short-tempered man, and I was really scared. And for 4.5 years, I was mentally and physically abused by him. And then I would go to the elders to say what had happened, and they would just turn around and say, not exactly it's your own stupid fault, but I must have done something, and I should be a better wife, and I should be more submissive and whatever. And I thought, okay, so it must be my fault. I ended up going to the police to complain about it, and he said the same thing.
The police officer?
The police officer.
Who happened to be a man, I'm assuming.
Absolutely. So then I was sure it was my own fault, so I must be this horrible person to have deserved it. And then he got closed out because he had a drinking problem. And he went and worked in the sex industry.
When you say closed out, was he disfellowshipped?
Disfellowshipped, I'm sorry, yeah. And then he worked in the sex industry in Antwerp, and then he found this lady. And I'd always said, you can hit me as much as you want, but I will not stand for you going to somebody else.
Yeah.
And then an old friend of mine, she says, your husband's car was out there all night, that's a bit strange, who lives there? And I investigated, and it was this other woman. So then I went to the elders and I said about it, and I didn't have any witnesses. So I'm like, okay, you actually have to stand next to them and see what's going on.
I thought another person had seen the car there.
Yes, but she was not a Jehovah's Witness,
right,
so that was a problem. Yeah. So then I came and moved to Holland because I was scared. He always threatened that he would kill me if I would leave him, and I believed that. So I just fled. I went into one of these abusive homes for women, shelters, which was horrible. So I left there, and then so I stayed with my parents for 6 months or something, and then I can always see my mother coming upstairs with a Bible, and I've been crying, and I had a lot to deal with. And she just stood there and said, don't you think it's about time you went back? I said, what now, after you know everything that I've told you, what went on? You want me to go back? I don't think so. So then I moved out there and I lived on my own, and my own apartment. And then I met Jean-Pierre. And Jean-Pierre was total atheist, totally opposite, but he was as kind can be. And I thought, well, I thought I knew this guy because he used to come to the house for many, many years before I married him. He was a friend of my sister's boyfriend, and I thought, well, that didn't help, so, you know, it doesn't really matter how well you think you know somebody. You never really know them until you're married to them.
No.
And so then I was called in front of the elders, and they found out about it. And I thought, how come that I don't need a witness to say?
Right, so they were concerned because you were technically separated at this point.
Yeah, I had a divorce, but then they said that was okay.
And then they found out about Jean-Pierre, and all of a sudden that was the problem.
That was a major problem.
Are these the elders back in the UK?
No, that was here in Holland.
Oh, here in Holland.
Yeah.
Because did they have your record card?
Yes, my parents lived here in Holland when I fled from Antwerp, and they lived here, so therefore I went to their kingdom all the year. And they knew me already for many years, obviously. And they were just like, okay, you're sinning against the Holy Spirit, so you...
Did they disfellowship you for adultery?
Yes.
Remarkable.
Yeah, exactly. That's...
But since that point, was that when things started to get better then, after you met Jean-Pierre?
When I met Jean-Pierre, I thought I'd died and gone to heaven already.
How much is he paying you to say that?
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. But spiritual-wise, I felt very lonely and abandoned because he then was the only person in my life. And I can always remember coming home after being disfellowshipped, and I said, you will never know how much I love you because I've just given up my life for you. Yeah. And that's how I conceived it to be true.
Yeah.
And so I felt very lonely because all the people that I'd grown up with, everybody that I knew, all my friends were in the kingdom hall, and all of a sudden you have nobody at all.
Yeah.
And it took me many years to think about myself in a different way than I was told by my ex-husband. Yeah. It took me years to recover from that. So then after that I just focused on my career, thinking, well, if I'm going to die anyway, I might as well make the best of while I'm alive.
Yeah.
And then I had children. I've got twins. So when they were born, then of course the fear came in of they're going to be killed at the with Armageddon.
Wow.
So I better go back, not for me, for them. So that's what I did, and I went back to the Kingdom Hall, very good, sitting in the little hall separate, and nobody allowed to talk to me, but my kids were, and that's okay. And one day there was this study about the talents, and I was thinking, this isn't right. I'm looking around and think, I see talents as not as in a case of money, but people actually having talents. And I think, and all they're doing is just shoving their talents in the ground until the Lord comes back. And that just made a click in my head. I thought, no. Because I'd also tried to be reinstated. And in my opinion, I had made everything right, what was wrong. I'm married, I had children, I'm going back to the Kingdom Hall, I'm doing everything that they want. And then I asked to be reinstated again, and they said, no, because you've been smoking. I said, well, I'm not smoking now anymore. That's me, and I'm not doing that anymore. So they said, no. I thought, well, it's you. Yeah. I thought, I'm glad I'm not in your shoes to be, the judge and the jury of somebody's life, and, whether you're going to be saved or not. But again, I thought, I didn't want to pray. I was scared of all that. I thought, God doesn't want to know me anymore. I've abandoned him for a man. Anything that went wrong in my life, I would think it was my punishment. I deserved it again, in a different way. And then I went into business, and then I met this man, Patrick Hart, and his lovely wife.
Mutual friend.
Yeah, mutual friend. And that was lovely, but obviously when you meet somebody that you think is a Jehovah's Witness, it's like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? It's I'm allowed to talk to you because we're in business, but I'm not. You shouldn't really be talking to me because I'm disfellowshipped. And Patrick took an interest, and it's like, well, why do you disfellowshipped? And when I told him, he says, that's not right.
Mm.
And then that was an eye-opener in itself.
Because he'd been an elder himself, so he
Yeah.
knew the...
Yes, and he'd been in the situations of the rules and how people are disfellowshipped, and you know, many times thought it wasn't fair. And seeing the same thing now, and I thought, hey, maybe it wasn't all my fault, you know. And so then he gave me this book of, what was it, Russell, which we weren't allowed to read back in the days. It was some...
Oh, you mean Crisis of Conscience?
Yeah.
Right,
yeah. And I read that, I think, in 2 days. And it's a thick book.
Yeah.
And I was like, what? Why did I do this 20 years ago? Yeah. And then I was really liberated, if you like. Seeing for things for what they were. And I thought, okay, I'll forgive everybody. I had a harder time forgiving those elders for really dumping me as I felt it.
And in a way showing preference towards your abusive husband.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Obviously, one of the reasons why I knew about your story and wanted to interview is because Patrick and I have been talking about you, and only in positive ways. And he tells the story that one day you came to him and said, you know, am I going to die at Armageddon or something like that? Do you remember saying that to him?
Yeah, I do.
So it was very much a case of, you know, clinging onto this self-loathing and fear of, you know, annihilation.
Yeah.
Many years after you'd been disfellowshipped.
Oh yeah.
So how many years was it from being disfellowshipped to kind of your awakening? From
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
That's a long time to hold on to that, isn't it?
Yeah. I'd also tried to commit suicide because of it. Because I thought, well, I can't...
So you attempted suicide?
Yes. I'm thinking, I can't get out of the situation I'm in. I can't be, you know...
Was this while you were married to Jean-Pierre?
While I was married to Jean-Pierre, yeah. Well, I did it twice, really. I did it while I was married to the other one, the first one. And then also when with Jean-Pierre, things weren't going right, and I'm thinking, this is my own fault, and, you know, I'm not going to be saved anyway. I can't...
And those attempts at suicide would have been inconceivable were it not for the structures of fictitious situations that you've been presented with. That Armageddon's coming, that only certain
people... be destroyed,
It's astonishing, isn't it? So you could have been dead, and we wouldn't be having this conversation because of purely fictitious teachings. And I think with the domestic violence situation, as I said at the beginning, I feel frustrated that I can't give it more exposure, because it's very much reliant on people like you coming forward and having the bravery to tell their story, which I'm sad to say not many people, not many women are. But I think one of the main problems with the domestic violence policy, there'll probably be some Jehovah's Witnesses watching this video who are thinking, well, what's the problem with domestic violence? And the problem basically is that Jehovah's Witnesses view marriage as absolutely final, and the only way out of it is adultery. And it doesn't make any difference if the husband is being violently abusive and endangering the wife's life. In which case, what's the point of being married in the first place? The whole point of marriage is to better the lives of both the husband and wife, not to end the life of one of those. So it's absolutely astonishing how, and people say, oh well, Jesus said to the Pharisees, the only way out, the only way you can be divorced is through adultery. But Jesus also had a lot to say about mercy, didn't he?
Absolutely.
And common sense, you know. It's just astonishing that the governing body clings to this Pharisaic notion of no, the marriage is final, and if a husband is beating his wife, probably it's the wife's fault for not being Christian enough.
Now, years after, I now compare Jehovah's Witnesses to the Pharisees, because the letter of the law says, you know, and that's not what Jesus came to teach people, you know. And when love is the number one rule, and the number one law in your life,
Mm.
then abuse doesn't fit into that.
No.
Because if you love somebody, I can't hit somebody that I love.
No.
Don't know about you, but...
Well, once someone's being violent, they lose their right to be in that relationship because they're endangering that person's life.
Yeah.
So, you know, you lose your place at the table, you know, in any relationship once you start being violent. So, but I'm really glad that you got out of that toxic situation, and I'm even more delighted that even if it took you 20 years, you finally managed to wake up from your indoctrination. If there's any women watching this who are themselves being abused by their husbands, perhaps Jehovah's Witness women, what would be your advice to them?
I would advise them to really look into what Jesus said. If you don't believe people, believe what the word says, and nowhere does it say to beat your wife. Nowhere does it say to be abusive. It only talks, Jesus only talks about love, love, love.
Yeah.
And abuse does not fit into there. And I don't care how many people tell you it's your own fault. And this is probably one of the reasons why so few women are coming forward, because they might still believe that it's their own fault, like I did for so many years. And but I would say get out of the situation. God is a loving God, and you know, elders are just people, and especially when them doing it themselves, they have no right to speak.
I was going to say, would you recommend abused women to go to elders?
No.
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 It's very weighted against the woman, isn't it?
Yes.
Because especially if the husband is a friend of the elders and they're men themselves, there's always going to be a kind of boys' own camaraderie.
Oh, absolutely.
That kicks in. So
I still believe, even till this day, that there are a lot of men that actually join Jehovah's Witness and marry Jehovah's Witness, so they can be, you know, abusive type of person, or think that they're the boss kind of type, and you know, narcissistic, if you like, and that's welcomed into their rules and regulations.
And as regards, you know, your experiences with feeling suicidal, and because it must have taken a big leap of faith, for want of a better word, to even read Crisis of Conscience. If there's anyone watching this video that hasn't read Crisis of Conscience and they're feeling scared to read it, what would you say to them?
I would say drop the fear and just read it, and you know, don't believe what people say. Investigate for yourself. See if it's true, and you'll find out it is true. So anything that you would see on television that would, like I was telling you earlier on about ID, about this other lady being killed. I was lucky, if you can call it lucky.
This is a documentary about a JW husband who actually ended up shooting his ex-wife and her 3 children. After she managed to get out of the violent relationship, he still managed to track her down and kill her. And it's, I can't think of the name of the documentary, but I'll probably mention it in the description below, because it's a fascinating documentary to watch.
And as I said, it just looked so much like my own story. It was like being there all over again, only that I was lucky that he didn't end up shooting me.
Yeah. And you've escaped with your life.
Yes, I did.
You're in a happy marriage.
Very much.
You've got wonderful children. So things are...
Oh, I'm very happy.
Things are looking up for you.
Very much.
And you've survived an interview with me. So. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. And we'll see you soon.
Okay.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.